We may be in for chaos at airports again soon if Congress doesn't act. That's the warning from the Department of Homeland Security. Tuesday, DHS Secretary Mark Wayne Mullen told Fox News he'll run out of money to pay workers, including TSA agents, the first week of May. Right now, they're being paid with money from President Donald Trump's domestic policy bill after he issued an executive order last month, but available funds for that purpose are about to dry up. Congress is still gridlocked on the issue. Senate Republicans hope to push funding through using a process called reconciliation that would allow them to pass it with a simple majority, eliminating the need for support from a handful of Democrats.